Hello and welcome to the Johnversations podcast. As always, I am your host, John Connor, saying thank you for spending some time with us this week. If this is your first time checking out the show, super happy to have you. Thank you for coming and checking it out. If you are an old regular bellying up to the bar for another episode, thank you so much for coming back. And while we've got you guys, before we jump in, please make sure you're taking a moment to follow us on the socials. Head over to Instagram. That's at Johnversations. Hit that follow button. Go over to Facebook if you're one of them old Facebook people. That is facebook.com/Johnversations as well. And if you are one of them hip Twitter folks, we are on Twitter at a Johnversation. Please follow us. Keep up to date with what's going on. We're asking questions. We want to hear your input. Want you to be part of the show. Who do you like? Who do you want to have on? Who's been your favorite guest? Things like that. So also, if you guys have a chance, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, if you watch on YouTube, there is a share button. Hit that share button. Send it to your friends. Show your favorite episode off. Let them know that we exist. We're trying to get the show out in front of as many people as we can, and we can't do that without you. So if you are someone who's sharing the podcast already, thank you so much. And if you have not done so yet, please, I encourage you, let people know what you like. Again, your favorite guests, anything like that. To that effect, also wanted to ask you guys, feel free to hit us up at contact@Johnversations podcast. We want to hear your spooky stories. We are in full swing in October, Halloween. Got an idea coming up for an episode where we kind of showcase some spooky personal stories. I plan on sharing one of mine. Definitely want to hear from you. Did you have an experience, something that you can't explain? Again, something that happened to you personally. So again, you can send us that email at contact@johnversationspodcast.com. You can head over to Instagram, send us a direct message, Facebook direct message. You can go to the website. There's a contact form there as well. But really want to hear from you. What spooky things happen? And we may share them on an upcoming episode. So now that we got all the fluff, the fun, all that stuff out of the way, I hope you guys are happy. Hope you're healthy. Hope your families are doing good. Let's talk about our guest this week. I am jacked, super pumped. Trying not to use the word excited because you guys are like, yeah, he's excited every week. My guest today is a podcaster, media creator, all around just fun guy to talk to. He is the co-host of the Horror Virgin podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the platforms you can listen to on YouTube. Also, the host of Romancing the Pod as well. We sit down today to talk with Mr. Todd Schlosser. Super excited that he was here. It was a great time, a great interview, lots of laughs. So again, hope you guys are excited to hear it. Thank you for being here. Let's jump into the episode. Todd, thank you so much for being here, man. I have been super excited to talk to you all week.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to do it. Very happy to be here.
For sure, man. I really appreciate it. I got to tell you, we kind of linked up through the podcasting group that we're both members of, and you told me about your podcast, and I went back and started listening to it, and I love it. It's awesome. Well,
thank you.
Oh no, you're very welcome. I'm a horror fan. And usually for us, on the podcast here in October, we try to do very Halloween themed episodes and have, kind of guests on and stuff like that. And you fit in perfectly. So again, thank you so much for doing it. And the Horror Virgin, man, it's so good. I did want to ask you just to kind of like kick off the conversation. You guys have been going since 2018.
Yeah, I think our first episode was in June of 2018. It was mid 2018. It's been so long now, I can't remember the exact. Actually, I can. It was June 11th. It just came to me.
Nice. Yeah.
2018.
You started, it was 2018. You started with The Exorcist. So I want to get into that, but I first wanted to ask you, because there is so many with what you guys do and the number of years that it's been out, like there have been other podcasts that kind of follow the same format that you guys do. So
oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you first, when did the idea come to you and your co-host Mikey, and two, what was it like for you kind of setting it into action and getting the ball rolling?
Okay. So it's actually this story takes place over years. But it actually started with so on the Exorcist episode, in the first 20 episodes, our co-host Clint was one of the original co-hosts. Clint and Jen and I started the podcast together, and it was Clint's idea. Clint wanted to do this. We started in 2018. I think he first approached me about the idea in 2014. He was like, I want you to watch horror movies, because he knew I hated horror movies and he loved to torture me with stuff, because that's the kind of friends guys have. And but I kept saying no. I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to watch these horror movies. It sounds terrible. Anyway, so we had just both recently moved back to Nashville from Southern California. He got a writing job out in LA and was there for a few years, and I was in San Diego. And he came back a little bit before I did. And then I had a relationship go bad, and I came back to Nashville, and I was looking for projects to keep my mind off my sadness. And I was just like, hey, remember that podcast you wanted to do? Let's just do it. And so that's sort of what got the ball rolling in probably early 2018, because I moved back late 2017. And we found Jen. Actually, Clint knew Jen. She was like an old church friend or something like that. In fact, I think they dated very, very briefly in between relationships before, but way before Jen got married. Anyway, so they were still like friends. And then we met for coffee, and the energy was just good. And we were like, let's do this. And we recorded our first probably handful of episodes at Clint's apartment in early, probably, it was actually probably late May of 2018. And, that was the Exorcist. And, oh man, I can't even remember at this point. I remember Urban Legend was the second one. Oh man, it's been so long since we've done it. But yeah.
Was Frailty one of the early ones too, I think, going through?
Powers Booth. Yeah. Frailty was one of them. That's one of the, so I don't know if you get this yet. I'm sure you will at some point, but people will say things to you online that you said in an episode 3 years ago, and they'll expect you to be in on the joke you made. And I'm like, that's one thing I said 3 years ago to somebody. I have no idea what you're talking about. So yeah, I have people that still will just send me full caps tweets at Tajay Awesome Powers Booth. And I'm like, okay. I mean, that was 3 years ago, but I'm glad you really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that movie is a trip, man. Matthew McConaughey in that movie is just, he's doing something. It's fun. It's fun to watch.
I admire actors who will swing, and just sometimes they nail it, sometimes they don't. Like Nicolas Cage, I think I have a lot of respect for, because sometimes he's nailing it and sometimes he is just Ghost Rider, and I'm on board for it.
Have you guys watched Vampire's Kiss yet?
No, we haven't.
That's a good one, man. If you want to see Nicolas Cage recite the entire alphabet like Nicolas Cage, A, B, C, it's so good. You just watch the clip. I mean, you don't have to watch the whole movie, but watch the clip. It's like just Nicolas Cage perfection. He's swinging for the fences and everything they fucking do.
At his most Cageness.
Oh yeah, there's a point in that movie he's walking around in a nightclub with the Halloween vampire teeth in, the ones little kids wear. He's like it's out there.
I think I've seen that reaction GIF on Twitter. I'm 100% sure I have seen that. I didn't know what movie it was from, but yeah,
it's crazy.
As far as production goes, that sort of fell to me because I at one point in my life was a traveling musician. I played drums in a band, and we were on the road all the time. So out of the three of us, I knew the most about how to record and how to create. I say good sound, but if you listen to those early episodes, it's mediocre at best. But I've gotten better over time. But that's all of that production work fell to me just because of my background in it. And I think that I was the only one that had the patience to figure out how to edit a podcast. And I don't know how much you edit your podcast, but I probably spent about 7 to 8 hours on episode for both Horror Version and Romance in the Pod, editing them. And that took me a long time how to learn how to do. But I'm glad I did, though. I really do think a lot of the success of the show is because they are drilled down to its base elements. There's no fluff unless it ends in a laugh line. That's my formula. If we go on a tangent and it gets a big laugh, I'm leaving it in. If we go on a tangent and Mikey makes a joke that doesn't land, or I make a joke that doesn't land, that's getting cut, and then we're moving on. So that's I feel like that's one of the keys to the success of the show.
Yeah, you work harder than I do, man. The reason we do the podcast the way that we do is so I can do as little editing as possible. Because I'm like, let's just have a conversation, and if you want something out, let me know. I'll take it out. But it's I don't know, man. It's really fun to listen to, and I've kind of jumped in. And I've listened to the It episode for chapter 1, chapter 2.
Yeah, those were brutal movies. Those movies so scary.
Well, I wanted to ask you, so and for people who are like, okay, what is this podcast about? You are the quote unquote horror virgin. So you are the one that not a big fan of horror films, and your friend Mikey, the people you start the podcast with, they're like, well, you're gonna watch them and then we're gonna talk about them. So going to that first episode. Because The Exorcist is one of those films that's just I have to admit, man, and maybe it's because I'm of an older generation, but I went and saw it when it was re-released in theaters, and what I did not scare me. Was not impressed with it at all. But I mean, it's a good film, but I didn't think it had all the hype, or it was worth all the hype that it's gotten over the years. But again, I was born in '85, wasn't a teenager in the '70s, so
right, yeah, so like. For people like my mom who like saw Rosemary's Baby and stuff like that in the theaters, like that was super scary for her. I think that the movies that we're exposed to now are so much scarier than The Exorcist, that The Exorcist I wouldn't say it's silly, because it is still like a well done 70s movie, but it's still a 70s movie. It's still one of the early horror movies, like that post Hitchcock era that wasn't just all suspense. You see some stuff in that movie, although admittedly not a lot, but there is some stuff in Exorcist. But I can't remember what I gave it on our scary scale, because every episode we do a scary scale and we talk about how scary it was. I can't remember what I gave Exorcist, but I mean, now I would definitely put it at a 1. We've seen way scarier stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, that was probably, I think before we started the podcast, I believe I had seen like 4 or 5 horror movies in my life. Like The Omen was one. The Blair Witch Project. I had
Damien. That's so good.
Yeah. And I saw the Blair Witch Project in theaters when I took a quote unquote date to high school to see that, and that went badly. We never went out again. So like, but that was pretty much my exposure to horror, and The Exorcist was not nearly as scary as I think people in the 70s thought it was.
Yeah, and also I can imagine. It seems like that time period had a lot more religious overtone to it than maybe now does. Cause we grew up Southern Baptist, but I was always just like, meh, and so, I mean, I can't imagine seeing that movie in the 70s as like a staunch Catholic. I probably would have been like, what the fuck is, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do think religion was a bigger part of people's lives back. I mean, you can look at studies and know that, but like, I do think that especially for Catholics back in the 70s, like, I understand why they were scared, because when they saw The Exorcist, they were like, oh my God, is this a documentary?
Right.
Like any of that stuff could have been real. So, and I think now when we look back, we're like, oh, this is sort of silly.
Yeah. The advertising though for it was really good, because, they did like, people are fainting in the theaters, like leading up to it. And so, I mean, I think even if it's not that, even if you go into it and you come out and you're like, it's not as scary as you think it's going to be, it kind of, that advertising kind of plants that seed in your brain where you're terrified because you're waiting for what's going to happen, Yeah.
It's like Jaws. So like in Jaws, you don't really see the shark until like the very, very end of the movie, but you're scared of it the whole time. Right. So like, if you're going in with all that expectation into the theater, you're going to be like, oh, what's around every corner of this thing,
Yeah. I love Jaws too. That's a great one. It's funny that you said you took a date to see, the Blair Witch Project, because I remember we must be a couple years apart, because I feel like I was in middle school. Yeah. And my dad took me to like a midnight screening the night it came out. And I remember he came out and he was like, this movie sucked.
What?
He was like, just a bunch of people running around the woods.
Oh man, that movie scared me so bad. We actually watched it recently for the podcast and did an episode on it, where Mikey actually reached out to the girl I took to the Blair Witch Project as a quote unquote date, because she was like, I was unaware this was a date. Anyway,
it's a whole thing. Hanging out, man.
It was more than just 2 people, but I mean, it was like one of those, like, I thought it was a date because I grew up in a very religious setting, and like you would go on like group dates, but like spend time with one person, right?
Right.
And that's very much what that was, but it wasn't a date for her. It was a date for me. And I had no idea. Anyway, we talk about it in the episode because he interviewed Rachel and I was like, oh, thank you for doing that. That's great.
Well,
but yeah,
I did want to ask you this, and I'm going to have to listen to that one because I imagine being a kid who was overweight, and I look like Shrek with hair when I was in high school. And so I'm sure I had plenty of those. I think this is a date, but it's not a date. But
yeah,
I did want to ask you this, like, at this point, I mean, you guys have done what, you're coming up on like episode 170, right? Like,
oh no, I think we're in the 180s now.
180s. Okay.
I should know. Like, we have one going up tomorrow, and I should know. Let me check. Yeah, so Horror Virgin is on episode 184, drops tomorrow. Okay. But yeah.
So do you still hate watching these movies now?
Yeah.
You do? You do?
Yeah, absolutely. We're recording an episode for Host. We were going to record it today, but I had some dog troubles, so we weren't able to record this morning. But I watched Host, which is like a 57-minute like short movie that went to Shudder, but everyone like lost their minds about it because it is super scary. And I was watching it this morning and it was super scary. Like, I really do hate watching these movies. I mean, not all of them. We do some horror comedies that are like, they're fun. Like, oh man, what was Cabin in the Woods was fun to watch. Like,
you guys did Evil
Tucker
Dead
and Dale
2.
versus Evil. Yeah, Evil Dead 2. Like, there's a bunch of really fun horror comedies out there that I really enjoy watching, but most of the movies, at least that are like super scary, I hate watching. Especially, like, I don't handle jump scares well at all. Like, my whole body tenses up and then I yell at the screen and it's terrible. But if they don't have a lot of jump scares, like if it's just tension, I can normally get through it fine. I'm still nervous the whole time, but if there are any jump scares, I'm losing my mind.
Dude, so my wife is not a horror fan. She's like you, where when they come out in the theaters, I love to go see them. She actually humored me. It was 2018 and she was like 8 months pregnant, and the Halloween remake came out. And so she went with me to see that. Yeah. And I was like, I definitely hope you don't get scared to the point where you have this baby in the movie theater. But but she doesn't go with me very often. So I end up going with my mother-in-law, who loves them. But she is like Rocky Balboa in the movie theater, dude. If there's a jump scare and you're sitting next to her, she throws her arm out and just straight like I've been hitting the chest and the arm. So I looked at her one time. You hit me again, I'm hitting you back. Like, it's just she's and she just scream like literally throws the popcorn stuff. Like, it's crazy. But the Halloween Kills is coming out, so she texted me and was like, are we going to see this? And I was like, are you sitting 2 seats away from me? Because I will definitely go. But
as long as we properly socially distance, I'll go see it with you.
Oh, for sure, dude. And even when it could be a movie that she's seen 30 times and we're watching it like on Netflix at the house, she's still, if you're sitting next to her, like it's like it's an involuntary reaction. I was wondering, like, do you have, my wife, when we go, she'll like put her head in her shirt. Like, that's her like kind of thing. Do you have any like involuntary reactions when you're watching this, or anything that you noticed?
I will do this thing where the shirt comes up to the eyes, or and normally it's just my hands. Like, I'll cover my hands, like literally my fingernails touching my eyebrows, sort of a thing,
like Shutters.
It doesn't help.
Hello.
Yeah. Like Shutters. Yeah. It doesn't help at all. It's still very scary. And I do try and like actually watch the movies, because I feel like that's like the premise of the podcast. And if I don't know what's going on, I can't effectively talk about it on the podcast. I don't want to be like, oh, that's what happened, know? So I do sort of force myself to watch these movies. But I will like put my hand up and like try to block the devil from coming at me or whatever's on the screen,
Well, has there been one that has like, so for me, I remember, because I've always just been really into movies in general. And I remember being younger, I worked at Blockbuster, and it was the best job because you could take home whatever you wanted. And so I was like, I'm going to dive into a bunch of these horror films I've never seen. And I took home the original Last House on the Left. And I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not.
That one there aren't very many films that I've had to like turn off And that was one of them where I was like, I can't watch this. But has there been anything for you that is like stuck with you, or like to the point where you're almost like, I can't do this?
Yeah. So Hereditary, we saw in the theater in 2018. I think it was the third movie we recorded an episode for. So we were still going to we went to the theaters, then we went back to Clint's house. I think we started recording that one at like 10:30 at night because we had gone to the theater and then we went back to his house. But I was so freaked out by that. That movie stuck with me for weeks afterwards. We actually got back to his place, and Clint is a lot like me. We're perpetually children, right? And he used to work at a movie theater. And when Spider-Man, the movie, came out, they had this like thing they put up in the corner of the movie theaters, not the actual like screens where the screens are, but like in the concession area of the theater. And it was like a life-size Spider-Man that would sit in the corner of like the ceiling right there. I'm assuming didn't steal it, but when they got rid of it, he just took it home. And that was in the corner of his house. All of that long story to tell you, when we got there, I was the first person to walk into the apartment. And I don't know if you remember in Hereditary, if you've seen it, there's a scene where the mom is in the corner of the room, like hovering there. I had forgotten that Spider-Man was there. And I literally was like yelling. I was so scared. Like I was like, turn on the fucking lights. Like I was screaming. I was so scared. Oh man, it was not a fun night for me. And I think you can hear in that episode, it's been so long since I've listened to that episode, but I remember when I was editing it, I was like, wow, I sound mad during this episode.
But that's got to be a fun way to do it though, because like I think it's one thing to like watch it and then be able to process it and then come back and like talk about it as a rational, like you've taken some time to step away and okay, what do I think, as opposed to like going to the theater, having the experience, and then sitting down to capture it like right in that moment where you're still like, what the fuck was that? Like, what did I just watch? Yeah.
Well, and I still try and watch the movies as close to recording time as possible. Like we were going to record at 9 a.m. this morning. So I got up to watch Host and I started at 7, at 7:40, I think. Cause I was going to have like 20 minutes in between. But yeah, I like doing that. I like it to be as like fresh a reaction as possible. Although I will admit that's gotten me in trouble sometimes because I've been like, I hadn't really thought through the implications of a movie and I was talking about it. And it's sometimes the reach of the podcast surprises me when people come at me from all different directions and they're like, you're an idiot. You missed this very clear symbolism thing. And I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. Had I given myself a day to think about it, I would have put that together, but I just didn't,
Now, is it funny to you, or did you ever have the thought as a child that when I grow up and I'm an adult, I'm going to be setting an alarm for 7 a.m. so that I can get up and watch a horror film and then actually do something that's profitable, like is it,
no,
you ever step back and just kind of be like, what the fuck am I doing? You know what I mean? Cause it seems like,
yeah, all the time. I mean, I literally, like I'm a regular person. Like I have a day job, so like I get up and I do work. I mean, I used to go to work, but now a lot of us are working from home, which I am most of the time. I go into the office occasionally, but it's pretty rare. And yeah, like it's weird. Like my day consists of like a normal weekday is like get up, do work or go to work, depending upon the day. And then like come home, watch a horror movie, record a podcast, and then put that insanity out into the world. And for whatever reason, people like hearing that. And that has become like a part of my life. It's a very strange existence. And it's also sort of weird because we'll do like meetups, sort of in between COVID and the Delta variant. We had a meetup where like everyone felt safe-ish. Everyone was wearing a mask, and we like rented a theater and watched the movie together.
Was okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet. We rented out a theater, and we were like, hey, because of COVID restrictions, we can only have X amount of people come. But we had to like put up a waiting list because a lot of people wanted to come. We had people drive like 9 hours to come watch a movie with Mikey and I. And so like I was blown away by just the reach of that, that people care enough to want to come. And like, I don't know. It's very, very cool to exist in that space. It's also sort of humbling because, and that's one of the reasons I work so hard on making the podcast so good, is because I really like love the community that's around it. And I really want them to have like something good to listen to every Monday. And then with our sister pod, Romancing the Pod, on Thursdays. So like, I don't know. I just have I feel a lot of responsibility to these people. And as you mentioned, like, we do have a Patreon, like people pay us. Like it is sort of generating some revenue. So like it is sort of a job at this point. It's a job that I sort of love to do, but it's still sort of a job. You know, they expect content and I'm happy to provide that.
Yeah. And it's, I will say this too, you know, again, after kind of hooking up with you, looking at, hooking up with you sounds weird. After
we have dated, he and
yes.
I, John and I are an item.
Yes.
His wife is fully aware. No,
and she's cool with it. And you know, beard on beard contact is always enjoyable. But
it's like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together
for sure. No, but it's when I was introduced to your podcast, I first thing I did is I went to Apple Podcasts. I'm like, okay, they've covered a lot of movies that I really, you know, you guys have done Army of Darkness, which is one of my all-time favorites, Halloween. But then I started looking at like your Facebook group, and you guys have a subreddit, and you have people who are actively engaged and like very invested in what you do. And I know that you talked about it, but like these people, like when you rented the theater, first of all, what movie did you guys watch when you rented the theater?
Oh man, this is embarrassing. I honestly cannot remember. I was terrified. Oh man. Oh, I honestly can't remember at this point.
Okay, no problem. We'll cut that out.
I'm so sorry. I should.
No, you're fine, dude. Like I said, you guys put out a lot of content, and you're doing.
Yeah, we do so many movies. I honestly, I can't remember. That's so wild.
But
yeah,
I guess like, what is it like for, you know, kind of what we're talking about? Like, what is it like for you to like, we're gonna do this event, and then you get a response that's so big that you literally have to have like a waiting list, like.
Oh, that was weird. I mean, it was. True, it's truly humbling, and with the Facebook group, we have a Discord server as well where people like literally we talk daily. Like I'm in there all the time. Like today, like we had a sort of a emergency with one of our animals. Like it was a very like heartwarming or supportive. It's very supportive. Like and we do that for each other. And I feel like I'm just a member of this community, even though I am on and produce the podcast that it's around. I do feel like I'm just a member of it and like getting to know people. And I sort of feel like having a podcast is sort of like being the worst friend in the world because they know everything about you and you make them laugh and stuff, but you never give them the opportunity to tell that, them about you, you never give them the opportunity to tell you about themselves. Right. So I don't know anything about most of these people. So I love the Facebook group and I love the Discord server because I get to know people and I get to know like who's actually listening to the podcast, like, what they're into, what their likes are. Like I learned a little bit about their life and it feels less like a one-sided friendship to me and more like a community. And so like, that's one of the reasons I really love to engage as much as I can. Although I will admit there are days when, there's 100 posts in the Facebook group and I literally can't get to them all because it's just too many. But I'll try and go through and scroll and like I'll comment on things but sometimes it is a bit overwhelming. But I mean, days like today, it was very, very supportive and helpful.
Yeah. And it's gotta be overwhelming, but like in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, when you have the problem that there's so many people who want to interact with you because of what you do, you know what I mean? It's a good problem to have. You know what I mean? I sort
of look at it in a way as like I and Mikey and Paige now joined when Jen departed. I and the three of us sort of create this content and people like it, but they also like the community. And that is very much a collaboration of everyone who's in that Facebook group or everyone who's in that Discord server. So it's not just me they're coming to be with in those spaces, right? They're going to the Facebook group because they made friends with, Elizabeth and Drew. They are silly together and they'll like do things in Discord and stuff. And that has nothing to do with the podcast really, except for that they were both fans of the podcast and met each other through it. but they are now, friends. So they come to that space to connect with each other. And I think I take that kind of stuff super seriously too. Like I really respect and love that that space is one that people want to be a part of and want to contribute to, because it, like the Facebook group, I'll post a few times a week maybe, but they get, I think on a slow day, 25 to 50 posts, so a lot of people like provide sort of content to keep everyone engaged. And that is just, I love that. I love that about it. And I love that we, we do sort of focus on making it a safe space. And we have a team of moderators that do a great job of keeping it a safe space, because sometimes people get in there and they have a political agenda or they're just mean, and we weed them out very quickly because we don't want it to not be a safe space for people.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, this week we watch Candyman, and somebody's like, yeah, well, let me tell you about QAnon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we'll have stuff like that. And we weed some of those out even before they get in the group, like super early on, because in order to get into the group, you have to like answer a few questions, and we can tell, because our moderators will like not just look to see if you've answered the questions, but also look at your profile and like check you out. And if you're posting like QAnon conspiracy shit, we're probably not going to let you in the group. Some people do slide in. Like we literally had to ban a guy last week who was doing some crazy stuff. And, and sometimes it's actually more common. It's less QAnon or like stuff like that. And it's more creepy dudes. I'm going to be honest with you. Like dudes who join the group and they're like, they will immediately go through all the women and then like DM them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I saw you like this podcast. Want to meet up or whatever? Like, I don't know.
Creepy
and I also don't know why creepy dude
internet,
voice
man.
sounds like my voice. No, I know.
But like very similar.
Yeah. Like my creepy dude voice was just my voice, but like when I wake up in the morning,
right.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
Like that's how I sound. But yeah, like we ban more of those probably than anybody else, just because creepy dude's gonna creep, I guess, which is a bummer, but like, we want to make it a safe space, and so we get rid of those people too.
Yeah, for sure. And it is funny because like I'm a huge fan of The Office.
Yeah,
like
me too. My girlfriend and I will watch it when we go to sleep, like dude, a lot.
Dude, well, I was telling you before the show, and everybody who listens to our podcast is probably like, yeah, dude, we know you have a kid, but like my daughter, like when we brought her home from the hospital, like since day one, she would sit on my lap and watch The Office till she falls asleep, and like, yeah, she runs around. Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Like she knows. Like, she's like a straight up fan. We had this lady Kim Ferry on, who she was the head hairstylist for the show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It was very interesting. Some of the stuff that she was talking about.
That's awesome.
But I'm in a Facebook group for The Office, and it's the way that you talk about it is very funny, because it's like to me, I think it's one of the almost like one of the only good things about the internet that we have left is that like there is, you can find podcasts that you relate to, and then you can be in a group where you have this shared interest, and it's almost like, oh, this is what the internet was for, is like you have this interest, I have this interest, we can have like inside jokes about stuff, like, and it's got to be a cool feeling to be like, for all of the negativity that's out there, for all of the conspiracy theory and misinformation and stuff like that, it's like, in a way, what you guys do is kind of wholesome at that level, even though you're talking about, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, I mean, for an explicit podcast, we are sort of wholesome in that way, I suppose. I do think that like with the internet, and really I would say the democratization of media, because in the 70s, like when The Exorcist was out, there were 3 channels on TV, right?
Right.
Like that was it. And now you've got literally an infinite number of video content sources out there, right? You've got TV, and all of those have thousands of channels. You've got Netflix, you've got Disney Plus, you've got Paramount, you've got all of these like other streaming platforms, and audio mediums are the same way. You've got audiobooks and thousands, like I think there's 700,000 active podcasts right now. So like there's literally anyone can do anything they want. All they have to do is grab a camera, grab a microphone, and put their version of crazy out into the world. And I think that's great. And I love that. And because I'm literally just like a dumb kid from Nashville who got super into content creation when I was on Twitch, and then started doing it. And honestly, on Twitch, I was doing it fine. It did well. I made money doing it, but I enjoy the podcast so much more. I think it's a much better medium for me specifically. But to kind of come back to some of that QAnon crazy stuff, some people's crazy they want to put out of the world is very negative. And I don't want to be that. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Like, I would not want to make money being that kind of crazy. Yeah. I like my kind of crazy.
Yeah. So you don't have any Alex Jones in you, is what you're telling me. There's not going to be any Todd InfoWars like reboots.
Not yet.
Coming.
Although I did have to promise my girlfriend recently that I would not start a cult. I literally, because I tweeted out, wanted people to join my cult, and then I put like a bunch of spaces and then like an asterisk. This is largely for tax purposes.
I'm trying to make a tax shelter.
Yeah, but Natalie like texted me and she was like, "You cannot start a cult. Like, you have to promise me right now you will not start a cult." And I was like, "Oh man, all right, fine."
Well, and it's crazy. Like, I just watched this documentary on HBO Max called The Way Down. I don't know if you've seen. Did you watch it?
Okay, so I worked with someone who was on that plane.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I didn't know anything about the Way Down. I didn't know anything about the Remnant Church. I knew he was a member of the Remnant Church, but because you live here, there are churches on every corner. It's like Starbucks.
Yeah.
Sorry, my cat jumped off then knocked something over. But there are churches literally on every corner, right? So the fact that he was a member of the Remnant Church, I was like, oh, cool. Is that like a Baptist thing? Like, I had no idea, because they all have different names and it's fine. No one really cares. And he was one of the nicest people I've ever met. His wife was super nice. Like, I had been to their house before, because I do all the video content for my day job. And I would occasionally, he was like one of the higher ups in my company. So I would go and we would do like video shoots downtown. Like, I would travel around with this guy. Anyway, so when that happened and he passed away, sadly, and his wife was on the flight too, so she passed away as well. Man, like, I learned so much about that church so quickly from our internal PR person, because it became her job to field responses from the media. And apparently he wasn't like Gwen Shamblin's right-hand man or anything. He was just friends with them, and they were going on a trip somewhere.
Like, you want to hop on the plane? Richie Valens?
Yeah, sort of, right? So, so they La Bamba'd, and like, it was real sad, right? But anyway, so like, I did watch The Way Down. I watched it actually for work, quote unquote. My boss texted me. He was like, "We have to watch this documentary, ... for work." And they do mention his name, but it is very much like I don't know if you've seen the whole documentary. Have you seen all three of them? Yeah. So they mention his name at the end when they're talking about the people who passed away. He's one of those people, and his wife. But the whole series, they're talking about the bad stuff that the Remnant's done. And so we were like, because I didn't know him at church. I didn't know Church Jonathan,
Right.
I just knew Work Jonathan, and Work Jonathan was awesome. Like, one of the nicest people I've ever met. So I was terrified that Work Jonathan and Church Jonathan were two very different people, and that we were going to see some terrible stuff. And I was so glad that by the end of it, like, they hadn't been like, and Jonathan did all these horrible things.
He was
like,
locking kids in wicker boxes. And like,
yeah, like, and I was just so grateful that the person that I knew seems to be the person he actually was at church and at work. But there are 2 episodes that come out next year, so I'm still like a little nervous,
dude,
about it.
It blew my mind because we lived when I first moved here. I lived in Smyrna, and when it came on, they were like, it was the Smyrna at airport, like the air traffic control. I was like, holy shit, because I lived here when it happened, and I had heard about the plane crash, but I had no idea like anything behind it, and it's just I was telling my wife about it. My wife, she's like, very similar to how you are with horror films. She is like that. I'm into like a lot of true crime documentaries and stuff like that. And she was like, I don't know how you spend your time watching that stuff.
I love true crime though. Yeah, that's like, it's so weird. I actually have a lot of friends who like love horror movies and don't like true crime. They're like, true crime is too real. I don't like it. I don't want to hear people actually, like, I don't want to hear about how people actually died, right? And I'm so the opposite. I'm like, I want to figure out this crime and figure out who did it, and why they did it, and like break down the mind of the killer and stuff like that. but like Jason terrifies me, which is like, it's so strange. I get, but like, I don't know why, but I that's just the way I am.
Well, I was going to ask you because that kind of, I was, that was essentially my question was like, does that ever make it easier for you when you're watching these movies for the podcast to be like, okay, it's all, fantasy, but it sounds like at the end of the day, it's still like, no, this is fucking terrifying.
Yeah, it does not help me at all. I'm so scared almost all the time watching these movies. And I think it really is just, I'm afraid of jump scares, and like the tension really gets me. Like it really gets me. I just internalize it so much, I guess. Like we were watching, we just recorded our episode. I guess we recorded it about 7 days ago, for Haunt, the movie Haunt. And because Natalie, my girlfriend, does fitness competitions, we were in Chattanooga for a fitness competition, and I was literally watching that on my iPad in the lobby of the Chattanooga Convention Center. And like I was shaking, and like people were like, what the hell is happening over there? Why is that guy just stop watching
ISIS
it?
Videos?
Why are you watching scary stuff in public anyway? But like
I have a Patreon, you don't understand.
I have a
responsibility.
To do this. I have chosen to let my friends force me to do this. Anyway, but like but no, I still get scared by these movies. And people, I've had people be like, when are you going to replace yourself on the horror version with an actual horror version? And I'm like, I don't know, when I'm not scared of these movies anymore. I just don't see that ever happening.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more, maybe not even necessarily that the movie is scary, but it sounds like you're just not someone who likes to be startled. Like my wife.
Oh, I hate it.
My wife, she gets on to me all the time because I flinch. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe something to do with a fucked up childhood, but like if she like reaches out and I'm not expecting it, I'm like, huh, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm just going to give you a hug. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, like a heads up for affection would be great. You know what I mean?
John, I'm coming in for a hug right now.
So, yeah. So, I mean, do you think it's like, do you think it's more so, that aspect than like, oh, like I can't handle scary stuff, but I just don't like things popping out at me or.
Well, but that's scary. I think that is scary stuff. Like I went to one horror, what do they call those? Not horror theme parks.
Like the conventions or the.
Like haunted house. Why couldn't I think of the word haunted house?
I don't do those, dude. I love scary movies. So don't touch me.
So in 2019, Natalie and I and Mikey from the podcast went to a haunted house. I wanted to wear a GoPro. They like Patreon had asked if we could do this, and I was like, I'll try. I don't know anyone who works at the haunted house, and when we asked, they very much said no. So like they wouldn't let us do it, but they still made me go through it. Natalie and Mikey still made me go through it, and I the whole time was holding Natalie, who is, I don't know, 5 feet tall, 100 pounds. I was like throwing her in between me and whatever was jumping out.
You do fitness competitions, fuck them up.
Yeah, like fight. She's like, I don't do kung fu competitions. Right. She's like, I just look, I work out all the time. I'm like, I know that you got to protect me. Girlfriend who's half my weight.
Yeah, man. No, I don't. I will watch scary movies. I do not enjoy haunted houses. I do not.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard about the one in Ohio. It was like 2 weeks ago. Some kid got his foot cut because there was a dude that was working there and they gave him all prop knives to use, but he thought using like a real knife would be scarier. And he was right. Oh yeah. Well, this kid was like 8 years old. And the kid's walking and the guy's on his hands and knees, just like, with a knife and cut through the top of his tennis shoe. And
oh my God.
The mom called 911, was like, people in here stabbing motherfuckers. Like,
yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, that happens occasionally. I think it was somewhere in Nashville. Don't correct me, or you may have to correct me on that at some point, but like, I think someone actually did get stabbed because someone replaced a prop knife with an actual knife, and the person using it did not realize that and stabbed somebody, and like they had to go to the hospital.
Yeah, it's there's that extreme haunted house in no, I don't know. I watched there was a totally normal documentary. It was called like Haunters or something. And it was like about haunted houses. And I was like, this looks cool. And then it gets to this dude and he's like, I waterboard people. And like, Jesus Christ.
This is not Fallujah. I'm not doing it. No.
Like it makes him eat like dog food and shit. And like, you have to sign away. I guess if you get through, you win like $10,000 and nobody's ever made it through. And so there's all these like extremists that are like, I could do it. I could do it.
No, I'm not going to incentivize somebody to torture me so I don't get 10,000 of their dollars.
Well, if you change your mind, it's 30 minutes down the road. It's literally,
I'm out. No, I wouldn't make it out of the parking lot.
Dude, like, there's no parking lot. You sign a waiver. They tell you where to show up, and some dudes roll up in a van and put a bag on your head and throw you in the, like, kidnap you. Essentially, it's a simulated kidnapping, and then they take you to this farm. And then I guess it's on like Donkey Kong. And I'm like,
that sounds terrible to me.
Thank you. My sister, I remember she must have been maybe 9. And our neighbors used to do one. And they had they did it in their garage. It was just like for the neighborhood kids on Halloween. And there was a picture frame, and the dad popped up from the picture frame, and my 9-year-old sister just clocked him in the face. Like full, as soon as he popped up, just dropped him. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, man, no thing. I will be scared in the comfort of my own home. I don't want to, I don't know. It's like, it goes back to like that flinching thing. I just don't want people touching me. Like, keep your goddamn hands off me.
Wife. Yeah, right. No, I understand. I'm the same way. I don't want it either. Like, I just can't handle it. But I think I've gotten to the point now after 3 years of doing this where I can see, okay, this is a good horror movie. I get it. It's very scary. I just sort of hate that. So I hated this movie, but people should see this movie. Like, I will occasionally say that, like, honestly, if you're looking for like an in-depth analysis of these movies, like a serious horror podcast, that is not what we do. But like, we will still sort of like be like, yeah, you should check this one out. Like that sort of thing. Right. So I can tell you if it's a horror movie you should check out or not, but I will probably also say I hated it. But I mean, honestly, that's like the best review a horror movie can get, I think.
Right. Especially from someone.
if I hate it.
Yeah. If you hate it, that means it was terrifying, and people who are into it should go see it.
I mean, there are occasionally movies that I hate because they're just like badly made. Like, I think The Strangers was one of those that like people were like, oh, it's so scary. And it was just so laughably done. Like, from a production standpoint, I wasn't scared at all. See, so like there are movies that I don't find scary because they're so poorly executed, but that's rare. That's very rare.
See, I disagree with you, man. The Strangers got me because that's like,
really? Okay.
Dude, that is my fear is that there's like somebody in my house and I do not like, I'm just the house that they picked. And like that, I tapped into that. It's the same. I watched the Night Stalker documentary on Netflix.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark,
dude. No, I'll Be Gone in the Dark is the
that's right. That's the California Strangler.
Yeah. It's the Golden State Killer. Yeah. I watched the Night Stalker. The I'll Be Gone in the Dark's fucking awesome too. But
I know.
But I watched the Night Stalker one and I got done and I was like, this dude has been dead for like years, but let me make sure all my doors are locked, all my windows are that freaks me out so much more than like a Jason.
I'm Googling alarm systems.
Oh yeah. Oh dude. I have OCD about making sure my doors are locked at night. Like
same.
I'll like lock the door. I'll tell myself I locked it. I'll go into the bedroom, start getting ready. I'm like, did I lock the door? And I go back, turn on light, make sure. It's so bad.
Yeah, I'm on the second floor of my house right now, which is really just this one room. And I will come up and make sure these windows are locked. Like that's how scared I'll be sometimes. And honestly, there are times I'll come back to bed after watching a movie because sometimes we'll record during the week because we record 2 episodes a week pretty much for Horror Virgin and one for Romance in the Pod. So those are the 2, right? So we'll occasionally record the horror version during the week, and I watch the movie at like 5, we start recording at 7, and we're talking like we watch a scary movie and talk about a scary movie, and I'll come back to bed and like turn the lights on and go to sleep. Like I cannot like sleep in the dark, and Natalie just knows. Like I'll text her and she'll see, I'll be like, hey, you might want to put your sleep mask on tonight. So like some of these movies really do affect me. Some of them are, I found that especially with like Haunt was this way. I was super scared watching it, but because it was sort of unbelievable, like the things that were happening, I wasn't super, like it didn't stick with me very long. So like I was fine to sleep with the lights off that night, stuff like that. But like movies like Hereditary that like really stick with me, like that lasted for weeks. Natalie was like, I have to turn the lights off. I've got to get a good night's sleep. So yeah, it's some of them really do stick with me.
Yeah, like the one for me, I had to go see it because it was made in Michigan, and everybody was talking about like how good it was, and
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you guys do It Follows?
Yeah.
Did that one get you? Because that was one I watched, and I was like, this is absolutely it's so fucking stupid. Like the sexually transmitted ghost and that scene where they've got like the sheet over him so they could see. I was like, this is so fucking bad. And I don't know if I'm in the minority on that, but I was like, this is fucking awful.
Oh no, I know a lot of people who do not care for that movie, and I know a lot of people who really do love it. We did it. I remember it really scaring me, which again should not be a surprise to anyone. But I also remember not loving the metaphor of it. And I'm trying to look it up right now, but yeah, we recorded that episode, came out February 18th, 2019. And it was episode 40. I honestly could not tell you what I thought about the movie at that point in my life, but I remember being scared by it. There's one scene that really stuck with me. Like one of the ways the ghost, or whatever you want to call the thing that follows people, manifests is like this big, like hulking dude who's like disproportionate. I remember like being really affected by that guy just like showing up or being on the top of a house and the camera pans by. Like I remember being very affected by that specifically, but I don't remember loving the movie or the metaphor. Although you could go back and listen to the episode and you might hear me be like, oh, I love the metaphor of this movie, because I can't remember. And I honestly have not. I don't think I've ever revisited a movie we've done. I don't think I've ever went back and watched one, because unless it was like a horror comedy. Like I have watched House 2 a few times, because that movie is insane and it should be enjoyed often.
Oh yeah.
But like, it's not scary, but like the scary movies, there's no way I'm watching them again. I don't want to watch them to begin with.
I wanted to ask, has there anything that you've seen that you've been like surprised, like something that you went into expecting, like, I don't want to see this, and then have either enjoyed it or been like surprised by liking it a little bit? Or
there have been movies that I watched. So like Get Out, I think is a good example of that, where like I watched Get Out and man, I loved the intentionality that Jordan Peele packed into that movie. And then it come to find out in Fun Facts, when Paige was doing Fun Facts, it's like one of the things we do at the end of the podcast. We talk about like just fun facts that have come out about the movie. Like apparently he wrote that script like 200 times. Like he just packed so much intentionality into that movie that I loved that aspect of it. Like everything means, like literally everything means something. It's a tie to something else. The story is weaved together in such like a perfect way that I really, really liked the way that is. Like I love filmmakers that do that. Hated the movie. Hope to never see it again, because it really did scare me. But I love that aspect of it, and I think that's probably the best, because we've done Us as well, which is also a Jordan Peele movie, and I really do think Get Out is by far superior to Us, and probably I think for me just because of the intentionality that you can very clearly feel and see baked into that movie. Like that just feels so much like a labor of love to me, whereas Us felt like a very scary movie. That was a cool premise, but it was not at the level of Get Out.
Yeah, it's very much social commentary, like disguised as a horror film.
Yeah, and I feel like Us is to some level. I feel like Get Out is more about racism and Us is more about classism. But I do feel like, because those two issues are so intertwined in our society, that I think there are elements of both in both movies. But I really like, I don't know, I'm a dumb Southern white guy, and I feel like I sort of understood what he was trying to say with Get Out, and that I feel like, not that he should have to write a movie that is good for me, but I think he wanted to write a movie that would hit everyone on a certain level, and I feel like he did. And that doesn't mean that a person of color saw that movie and got the same thing I got out of it, but I feel like he wrote it so that everyone could get something out of it, and I feel like that is hard to do. As someone who creates entertainment myself, like there's no way I could make anything like he did with that movie. That is like such a special movie, and I think that's super rare for directors to be able to even get up to that level, or writer directors, I should say. But yeah, I just feel like that was such a statement he made with that movie about, well, I mean, I'm not even talking about the social statement he was making. I mean, like, hey, I'm not a comedian. I am a creator of stories. I'm a storyteller. Like, he blew onto the scene with that movie in a very, very visceral way. And that's just so fun to see. But I mean, I didn't see that movie when it first came out. I think it came out in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
we watched
earlier
a
than that.
video on demand. I remember, I think it came on like HBO, and we were like, oh,
Okay.
like we've been meaning to see this. Let's watch it. But the movie is just, it's so well cast too. Like, you've got like Bradley Whitford and Stephen Root is amazing in it. And it's a slow burn. I mean, it's like, you know, something's going on in like the last like 25 minutes of the movie. It's like all hell breaks loose. It's so good.
It really is. And I should say, like Keith Stanfield, I've talked about him on the podcast before because I love him in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have like a very big part in Get Out. And he and the people who are like, their bodies are taken from them,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you see the glimpses of them behind their eyes. Like, that to me is a level of acting I will never understand how you do that. And I was just so blown away by like Lakeith Stanfield, I think, and the other people who have those similar roles on Get Out. They have like 5 minutes on the screen, and I was so blown away with how
like
great
the
they were as actors.
Who's got like, he's just running in the middle of the night, like just comes out of nowhere. That movie, like that's one of those movies again where it's a lot of social commentary told in a very interesting way, but then still managing to have that like, okay, what the fuck? Like this freaked me out when he comes running out of the dark and then just turns. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
What is happening? Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very well done movie. All that to say, I never want to see it again. It was super scary. But I do think I've gotten to a point where I can recognize, okay, this is a good movie. It's just not for me. I am not the target audience for this movie. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you this, because a big thing of seeing horror films that I really enjoy, and I'm wondering as someone who you know, obviously it's not your cup of tea, but I'm kind of wondering if you do the same thing that I do. Part of the fun for me is trying to figure out what's going to happen in advance so you can kind of hold off the scare. Yeah. So it's like you watch something, you're like, okay, you know, the tension's building. This is where you think the scare is going to happen. It's not going to happen here, but as soon as you come back down, like that's when it's going to get you. So do you find yourself kind of playing that game as you watch them?
Yeah. And it doesn't help at all. Because I'll be like, oh, there's something behind that door, or there's something in the darkness. We're going to see something in the darkness. And then we do exactly see what I thought we were going to see. And I'm screaming like a 12-year-old girl. Like, I am terrified. I don't know why, but yeah, it just does not help me at all.
Well, is that the only movie I've seen in theaters since COVID was Conjuring 3. And that was, you know, again, in that like 8-day period where it was like, COVID's gone, we can go to the movie theater. And I went and saw that. And there's a scene where like there's a hole in the wall. And I'm like, okay, he's going to go look in the hole. You're going to expect something to be in the hole. He's going to turn around and then there's going to be something behind him and I was right. And it was still just like, okay, all right. But like, that's part of the fun for me, at least, is just to see if I can figure it out before it happens. Cause then I don't know. I feel like if you're a step ahead, it kind of takes that scare factor out of it a little bit. And I really like movies where I think I've got it and then I don't, and it still gets me real good. You know,
one of the movies I think that got me the most with that specifically I think it was Insidious. I know it's Patrick Wilson, because it's like they're doing maybe a seance or something where it's like going to this dark place, right? But it's actually daytime. So like it'll cut from the seance or whatever they're doing back to daytime. And you're expecting to see the demon in the dark place. And then it cuts back to Patrick Wilson and it literally like comes out from behind him in the daytime. Yeah. I remember like yelling, oh my fucking God. Like I was terrified by that because you're just not expecting it at all. You're expecting it in the night, you know? But oh man, like that stuff really gets me. I remember this is early on in the podcast, so COVID wasn't a thing yet, but we went and saw Nun in the theater, and the Nun is not a good movie. Like sucked. It is just a jump scare factory, and it was so relentless. I was sweating. I like hated it so much. That to me is probably my most uncomfortable theater experience ever.
Yeah, we went to
so scary.
Dauphin Island, Alabama, on like a vacation with my wife's family, and one of the nights it was raining, and I was like, well, you know, like they've got, I can sign into my Amazon, like let's like rent or buy a scary movie, like we'll just hang out.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we want to see The Nun. I was like, cool. It was $14.99. Like you couldn't rent it, you could only buy it.
Oh,
like,
wow. Okay.
I'm sure it's good. You know, I bought it, I got done, and I was like, that's money I will never get back. Like that movie is so bad. There's
only one funny part of that movie, and that is where the priest grabs the cross headstone and takes it with him. And then you see it later in the next shot. It's like next to him at the bar. I remember that scene so well because it's the only part of that movie I think is watchable.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of it's so scary. And like needlessly so. Like there are times where jump scares, I feel like, oh man, that was effective. Like that was good and it does further the plot or whatever. Most of them don't do that. Most of them are just like, hey, fuck you, Todd. You specifically, we're just going to scare you.
Like they're writing it like they're spending. Okay, how are we going to get this Todd guy? We have to come up with a screenplay.
Well, I do think it's me, or it's probably actually people who react to jump scares like me, but enjoy that feeling. Like I don't like roller coasters either.
Me neither.
Like people who like that feeling, right? Of, you know, being scared for a second and then that let off of tension. The people who enjoy that, like really love jump scares. I don't enjoy that. So yeah.
Have you ever been to Cedar Point in Ohio?
I think I have. That's been around for a while, right?
Yeah. It's in Sandusky.
I think I remember. Yeah. I think I remember being there as a kid, like a young kid.
Yeah. I grew up in Michigan. So Cedar Point was like 2.5 hours from us. So it was like,
okay,
that was a theme park to go to. And, we went, it was called the Millennium Force. And it was, you're literally, when you're going up, it's like almost like a 90-degree angle. And then when you go down, it's like 104-degree angle. Cause so you're literally like, it's curved and you're literally, but I remember going up that first one and you look over and the lake is like parallel with you. Cause you're just, you know, and I just had tears, dude. Just I was like, I don't want to be on this. I don't want to be. And I went with my high school girlfriend and I was just like, I can't like cry. I just got to try to be strong. And the whole time I'm just tears coming down my face with no expression. Just terrifying. I don't know, man. I don't know. That makes me think maybe there's something like weird with me because I do like horror films. I really enjoy them, but like haunted houses, roller coasters. I don't want anything physical. Like just
me either.
It's so weird.
I don't like it. I remember my last roller coaster experience was when I was in high school, and I went with I think we were in Texas, and I went to Six Flags. I think it's Six Flags over Austin. I think. And at the time, there was a roller coaster called the Flashback, and my friend Joey Keith was like, "Let's just do this roller coaster. It'll be fine. You'll be fine. It's really easy. I did it earlier." And we did it. And like we were slowing down, but we were not pulling back into like the station where we had got on. And he looks over at me like to the side because we were next to each other, and he goes, "All right, now we're going to do that whole thing backwards." And then the name Flashback of the ride went back through my head. And then the rest of the thing, I was just cussing out Joey Keith. Who we are not super close anymore. He was a very close high school friend. We were in drumline together, but I hope wherever he is now, he knows that I still love him, but I'll never forgive him for that.
Fuck him for that.
He is actually a great dude, but man, he really got me with that.
Well, that was my thing is I didn't want to curse. Like I was just like, I think my brain just shut down. Like I didn't know how to handle it. And so it was just like, you're going to sit here with no expression and you're just going to cry like a bitch. Like you're just going to have tears coming down your face. I did want to ask you this, you know, cause we had talked about the Exorcist and things like that. One of my all-time favorites is the original Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween. Yeah. I know you guys have done that.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Cause I've got a segment we're going to move into here in just a minute, but I wanted to kind of get your thoughts as someone who has seen that, especially because there's not like a lot of gore in it and things of that nature. Like when you watch that, do you remember what your overall thought of the original was?
So I have a lot of open disrespect for 70s movies in general. Just because I think like a lot of production values in the 70s were pretty terrible. And I think for John Carpenter to pull off what he did with Halloween on a very low budget, it's a scary movie, but there isn't a lot of gore, but there are like a lot of really, really tense moments, right? Like the iconic one from that is him sitting up, right? You think he's dead and he sits up, right? I think it's also in that movie where he like shows up in a shadow behind her, like he's in shadow, and then you slowly see his face become illuminated by the little bit of light in the room. Like those shots, I think, are so impressively done and so scary.
Dude, and you know how they did that? I'm super into like horror film documentary. They literally had a table lamp on a fader, like one of those old 70s. So they were just somebody ducking, and they had him stand there, and they just slowly turn like the little knob, and it's so fucking effective for like costing nothing.
Oh yeah, I couldn't tell you what that the budget for that movie was. Although that's one of the segments we do. We talk about budget and box office when we do these movies. And it's me that does that, so I should remember, but I don't. But
we've done 180 of them. It's fair.
I know, like I'm so sorry, guys. But yeah, I remember like obviously it was a low budget, but made a lot of money, and like deservedly so. Like John Carpenter had a long and illustrious career and made a lot of great movies, some not so great movies, but some that I love, like The Fog.
Oh yeah, it's terrible.
Not a good movie, but it's Tom Atkins at his most Atkins, and I love that so much. Anyway, also not Julia Roberts. That's my best friend's wedding that we did recently on Romancing the Pod. But it's also not Julia. What's her name? The girl from Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah. Jamie Lee Curtis is also in that, right?
Yeah, she did. I mean, she did, was a Midnight Terror Train, and
she did a bunch.
Yeah, until she did Trading Places, she was pretty much like a
screen queen.
Screen queen.
Yeah. But I mean, she's a great actress. I mean, but I really do think the Halloween is. It set trends that are still true. Like you'll still see in movies today, and I think that is so rare to do. You know, there are movies. I sort of think the Blair Witch Project did this some with found footage, but it's rare that you see movies that are like so good in a genre that everyone then emulates them. Like they just steal from them.
So the reason I ask is we have a segment that's called Questions from the Internet, and we got a theme. I'm going to play a theme song.
Okay.
Questions from the internet.
Awesome. So the question that we put out there is, everybody knows Freddy versus Jason, right? Freddy versus Jason was a huge deal. But what we were a little curious about is, what are some other horror battles that would be interesting to see? So the one that we put out is, if it were Michael Myers versus Pennywise, okay, who do you think would win in that altercation? And I wanted this question specifically for you because I really enjoyed the It episodes for chapter 1 and chapter 2.
Yeah.
And again, being someone who's seen Halloween. So I want to hear what you have to say. But before we jump into that, I wanted to shout out some people who answered online. So we have SB Lucky 99 on Reddit who said, Michael, Pennywise works off of fear and Michael is afraid of nothing. We've got Undead Metalhead 58. Michael Myers for sure. Pennywise lost to a bunch of kids and then got defeated in a roast battle. And then Cube Defy on Reddit as well said Pennywise. So we've got an alternate play out here. He has ethereal powers. He can shapeshift, he can teleport, and being an ancient alien would mess Michael up. And then a good friend of our show, Jessica Gomez, she writes for All Horror Magazine. She said, is this even a question? Michael Myers, like, what is wrong with you? She's coming on in a couple weeks, so I'm excited to break that down.
Awesome.
But
that's awesome.
I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, as someone who has seen, both these films.
Oh yeah.
Who do you think
we'll be
would
seeing
take
Halloween Kills later this month. Like we're going to do that episode.
I'm so excited.
Man, okay, so if it was me against either of them, I would have no chance against Pennywise because I'm so afraid of everything. So like, there's no way. Like, I do understand that he does get beat by little children in the books, but those kids can handle fear better than I can at my adult age. So like, that would be, I stand more of a chance with Mike Myers than Pennywise because I'm good at cardio. Like, I like to run. So like, I'd be fine. Ultimately, he'd probably kill me after like, I don't know, an hour because I'd get tired and he would just like walk, but magically beat me to the finish line.
Right.
But Pennywise would destroy me. I do think that I can't remember the name, but the first person who talked or the first person who submitted
SP
has
Lucky.
the right theory. Yeah, SP Lucky has the right theory though, because Pennywise does feed off fear. That's where he gets his powers from, and he may have more extensive powers than Mike Myers, but if he has nothing to draw off of, he can't use them, right? So I do think Mike Myers could beat him.
Well, and I was of the same thought, and I was actually very surprised at like how deep I just picked out a couple answers, but the debate, especially on the horror subreddit, got pretty deep. But my whole thing is Michael has no earthly fears that we know of.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Would going against Pennywise, would it be? I mean, he's got otherworldly power, so would he be able to present something, like very similar to Freddy versus Jason, which I'm not sure if you've done that one, but
that was like our 5th episode. Yeah. So that's a very good point, to which I do not know the answer. I mean, if there is something that scares Mike Myers, we have not seen it in a film really.
Right.
So it would have to be something completely new. I mean, oh man, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because we don't even really know, like with Jason, we know, he drowned, like he might be afraid of like water or canoes or I don't know, overly possessive moms, but like we don't know anything about that about Mike Myers, right? Like his backstory is sort of nebulous in some way that we don't really understand why he is the way he is.
He's
which
not
is probably
cool with teenagers having sex. That's what starts the whole thing.
Yeah, I get it. He's just an angry dad, right? But we don't really know though. I mean, although if you watch that first movie, like that sex that happens in that first, it takes like 30 seconds. Like
and then he just
I
runs
would be
downstairs.
upset.
See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. It was insane. Anyway, that was like my favorite part of that episode. I remember talking about that. Is like that dude did not last very long. No wonder Mike Myers was offended.
Yeah. Yeah. No sister of mine's going to be banging a one hump chump.
I know.
Teach you a lesson.
Do better for my sister.
Right. Well, again, man, I really appreciate you doing it. I absolutely love what you do. I love the podcast, and I'm excited. For me, it's almost like a treasure, right? Like you stumble upon something, and then you're like, oh man, that was really good. And then you're like, there's 180 of these, and I get to go back to and like that's another fun thing for me too is going back to that first episode and then getting to experience that evolution like after it's already happened. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
being like, oh, where did this start? It's kind of like, I think about it a lot like TV shows where like you watch the first season of a show and there's not a big budget, so everybody looks kind of raggedy, and then by like season 7 everybody looks great. You know what I mean? It's very similar with a lot of podcasts.
Everyone's lost 30 pounds and has hair plugs,
right?
Yeah,
like their teeth are all super white, and but I wanted to ask, for people who, I know you guys have a Patreon and stuff like that, but for people who want to support you, for people who want to check out the podcast, who may be listening, what is the best way for them to do that, that supports you guys as strongly as possible? Because I know, like, you can, is like there a certain platform that you guys prefer, or Patreon, stuff like that, like kind of?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that everyone defaults to be like, hey, support us on Patreon, because that's where you get monetary support. I think that there is more value at our level, at our stage, because we make money. We're getting hundreds of thousands of downloads a month, but we're not like, My Favorite Murder, we're not that level. Right. I think the best thing for like a podcast like this, that's really an indie podcast that no one was like, we're not Dak Shepard. We didn't start a podcast from a place of fame.
Right.
The best thing you can do for those people, whether it's us or, you, John, or any other podcast that you stumble across, is to literally just tell your friends about it and get other people talking about it and listening to it and really just contributing to that community. I feel like that is the best thing you can do to support a like indie content creator, is get other people interested in their content. Because that is the hardest part. Like when we first started the podcast, I was telling everyone I knew about the podcast and no one cared, because they were like, we love you, well, we don't like horror, or we don't like podcasts or whatever. You need to find people who like horror and like podcasts. And it's very possible that if you are like a person who likes the Horror Virgin, you're going to know people who like the Horror Virgin, right? Or who would like it,
Right.
because those are the people that you sort of hang out with. So like that is probably the best thing you can do for like an indie content creator is, I mean, and if you have money that you like, if you have extra money at the end of the month, Patreon's great. Like that's awesome. It really does help the show grow. But it's not as good as talking about the show, supporting the show, like by telling your friends and family, or really just engaging in the community. Like that's the biggest part, I think, of growth. At least that's what I've seen with the shows that I've done.
Yeah, and if people want to get involved with the Horror Virgin on Facebook, shout out the Facebook address, and then you guys also have the Horror Virgin subreddit on Reddit, right, where people can get engaged.
Yeah,
there.
so we have the Horror Virgin subreddit, which is just r/Horror Virgin. We also have the Facebook group, which is pretty much the only thing I use Facebook for anymore. It's facebook.com/groups/Horror Virgin, and of course we're at Horror Virgin on all the socials. Is where you can find us. And I'm at Todd J Awesome on all the socials if you want to follow me specifically.
Yeah, we'll link everything
yeah.
up in the show notes too. So if you're listening, cool. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, whatever, go in the notes, follow Todd, follow the Horror Virgin. I love the entire idea behind it. It like I said, it was incredibly original. And then to because I had heard of like Scaredy Cats and stuff like that. And then when I heard about what you did, I was like, oh, like this precedes this by like, 2-3 years. And it's just such a good idea, Yeah,
well, and that's why Scaredy Cats happened. And that's why Amazon UK did a show with a famous comedian over there in Europe, in the UK specifically, that is very much the same premise as our show, which people like. When they see that, like our fans get mad and they're like, man, F this guy, this is stupid. And I don't know. I'm always like, it's sort of a compliment. Like I like our show premise, but we don't have it like trademarked. Like you can't trademark a premise really. So like, I get why people want to use that.
Oh yeah. And I think it's also a sign of like, you guys are obviously onto something where
sure. Yeah.
You're doing something so well that people want to emulate it. And then the challenge for you is like, okay, how do I continue to be the best at what we do?
Sure. Well, I'll say this, like, I think you could say about our show that like, oh, you guys just sort of a horror ripoff of like, how did this get made? Or,
how did this get made? That's like one of my,
I love it. And so honestly, like Jason Mantzoukas is one of my favorite people in the world. Like,
what's up,
I met him very briefly at a Comic-Con, and he was so gracious and nice to me, and he should not have been. And I appreciate him so much. Anyway, but you could say that about our, like, we are just a ripoff of how did this get made, but a horror version of that. And I would agree. I'd be like, yeah, I love Paul Scheer, love June Diane, and I love Jason Mantzoukas. So that's like a huge compliment. Thank you so much. Right. But, there are 80 premises to choose from with podcasts.
Yeah.
So I don't really get super offended when people emulate ours. But yeah, you just have to do it better.
Yeah, it's like how many true crime podcasts, like, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Also, June Diane is my celebrity hall pass. My wife is like,
oh yeah,
you're more than.
Well, Paul Scheer might fight you on that. But
Paul Scheer gave me hope. Paul Scheer was like a normal looking dude, can bag a 10. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, you know why? He's funny.
It's super funny.
Yeah.
And we both have gaps in our teeth. So I'm like,
yeah, there you go.
Man, solidarity, brother.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of Michael Strahans in here. You know what I mean?
So. They had Michael Strahan on the league in there. But anyway, I really like, I'm a huge improv comedy nerd. So like that UCBLA that actually like spawned Jason Mantzoukas and Paul Scheer and honestly, most of the people on the league. Mm-hmm. Like I just love all of what they do. And I am not obsessed with Jason Mantzoukas, but like I listen to every podcast interview he does. Like I am just such a fan of his brand of comedy. Although what he does is more improv. Yeah, he's just so naturally funny, and he was a drummer, and like that's what I did as well. So like I've always sort of connected with this person. But again, and I sort of will tie this back to something I said earlier, I feel like we're friends. He doesn't know I exist. Right. So like that is the danger in having a podcast. And that's what I say when I met him. he was very gracious and very kind to me and did not need to be, because I was like, I came at him with the energy of someone who had been listening to him speak for 5 years.
Right.
And he was like, I am walking down the street in San Diego. I'm just trying to get to a restaurant or whatever. And I hope they don't serve eggs.
Yeah.
Like that was his vibe. Right. And so
I got
like
Gilmore Girls to watch. Get out of here.
yeah, well, yeah, because Gilmore Guys, his podcast. Yeah, absolutely. So like, but he was so nice and talked to me for probably 3 minutes longer than he should have. And that is a interaction I'll never forgive myself for. But he was so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I met they were filming the 5-year engagement in Ann Arbor when I lived in Michigan. And
Oh, yeah?
I was fucking hammered, dude, in Ann Arbor. And I bumped into Chris Pratt and Brian Posehn. And it was when Chris Pratt had only done Parks and Rec, really. And I didn't really know who he was, but I fucking loved Brian Posehn. And so
same.
I nerded. I was like, let me get a picture. No, wait, that's not cool. You don't want to take pictures of people. I was like, it's just so nice to meet you. And he was extremely cool, extremely gracious, but I was way too hammered for that interaction.
Yeah.
But
I've had moments like that, although I cannot use alcohol as an excuse. But yeah, like I was just so blown away by it, like how nice he was to me when he really should not have been. He should have Heisman'd me and like pushed me away and gone on to his whatever he was doing. But yeah.
Well, again, man, I really appreciate you hanging out.
Oh, no problem.
If you guys are listening to this episode, again, The Horror Virgin, Romancing the Pod, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the platforms. You can listen to it on YouTube as well. Go subscribe now, click the bell, subscribe on whatever platform you listen to. It is a truly awesome show.
Thank you.
A lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to listen to. So would you stick around for a minute after we wrap up?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys, that is episode number 65 of the Johnversations podcast. We will see you guys next week.